the Last Minute Blues podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donny Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on your home of the St. Louis Blues, 101 ESPN.
Well, look at us. Another episode of the Last Minute Blues podcast. We're in the Jeff Burton studio. Donny Fandango joined by, to my left, by Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN.
Diagonally. I'm going to have to put that on a note card on JR's head.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to put diagonally.
Why is this such a difficult thing for me to say? Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic.
For episode number 1000. Do you guys know that?
Is it really?
No, I just made it up.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, come on, man.
Dude,
That's hard to differentiate. That's like an organization leaving Arizona and going elsewhere because like there was a Last Minute Blues podcast pre-us, and then there's one us. Just do their credits carry over to the new
I think that they do.
Okay.
I absolutely do.
So go back and count them.
I wonder if we were even, I don't even know if we're even at 500. We might be, though.
When did you guys start this?
Holy crap. I don't remember. Well, it would have been 2019.
When the Cup run.
The Cup run. It was our boss, Tommy Mattern, coming to Jeff and I saying, you two need a podcast. Why don't you do something hockey? And then thankfully, Burton roped in Jamie,
Yep.
and then
7 years. I got to imagine you're closer to 1,000 than you are 500.
I really probably should look that up.
All right, there you go.
Well,
Donnie's
here's what we
next
got to
task.
do. We got a lot to talk about here in a short period of time because we've only got JR for a little bit, but big organizational news for the Blues yesterday. And I want to make sure that I get to all of these jobs here and titles. So first and foremost, the Blues named Greg Cronin and Vinny Prospal as assistant coaches. I definitely can't wait to talk to you guys about that. But also, Elliot Mondeau, who has been the video coach, he has been promoted to assistant general manager. Whoa, that's a hell of a friggin' promotion. And then on top of that, let's see, there's a gentleman named Jeremy Prospal who signed a multi-year contract to join the Blues as an assistant coach in video. And let's see, so David Alexander staying as the Blues goaltending coach, and then Ryan Stacy is the Blues video coordinator. I don't know if that's new or not. Is he a new one? He's been there for a while. All right, so let's talk about this. First of all, I want to ask you guys about Elliot Mondeau and a promotion from video coach to assistant to the general manager. That's freaking impressive. That guy must have done a hell of a freaking job to get that kind of promotion.
Well, I think he was 100% on the offside challenges, wasn't he?
He was really amazing about it too, yeah.
Well, the one thing when Jim talked with us after this news was announced earlier this week, I noticed that he said, Elliot just wanted to take a different path in his career, which maybe front office is something that's just intrigued him. He's been a part of the Team Canada with Doug Armstrong at the Olympics and the what was it that they Four Nations tournament. So I would assume this is just somebody that did the coaching side, enjoyed the video side, and said, man, I think I want to get into general manager, assistant manager work. And so you just get a different career path than an organization that just gets you a taste of it.
Yeah, he's always seemed like an up-and-comer. You see him around the rink. We don't really necessarily get to talk to a lot of the guys behind the scenes, but behind the scenes, he's been the video coach. He's been an outstanding video coach. And when you see him get the nod to go to Hockey Canada and participate, like Alex said, in the Four Nations, you realize kind of the reputation that he's building there. Young guy. I don't know how old he is, but pretty young guy. And, so now he's going to be on Alexander Steen's staff. We don't know any details in terms of his role. But as Jim Montgomery did tell us, just he wants a different trajectory. And when you think about what life is like as a video coach, to sit in that back room and not to minimize it because it's a very important job, but probably becomes a little monotonous. So now, hey, look, he's going to be able to sit in the management booth or wherever upstairs.
It honestly is. I mean, JRs know this. And I mean, I was lucky enough to get to talk with the former video coach. Like they legitimately every game sit there and the puck goes over the blue line, they mark it and then they go back and review it and mark it. So like, think of how many times the puck goes over the blue line every hockey game. Ooh. You're marking it every single time and watching each clip. So that could get a little overwhelming every once in a while. So I can understand a different trajectory at that time.
Absolutely so. Also, too, let's just jump into these Blues assistant coaches. I first want to talk about Vinny Prospal, who I remember for having a really long NHL career. He is going to be handling, from what I understand, the power play. Can you kind of talk about him first, what you see him bringing to the team and to the table here?
Yeah, 1,100 NHL games, and he's been on the power play, so he's going to work with with the forwards and the power play. He doesn't have any NHL coaching experience, but again, that long career as a player. And then the past 3 years, he's been with Rochester in the American Hockey League, and he's run their power play. And I think Ryan in Springfield put it out that under Prospal, the Rochester team was fourth in the power play, which, it's apples and oranges in terms of how that's going to translate at the NHL level. But he's a guy who played on the power play during his NHL career. I looked it up. He had about 80 or 90.
Yeah, I think in the time frame of when he started his career to when he ended his career, I think he was like 55th in power play goals amongst forwards in that window. So, I mean, it's not the best of the best, but he's up there with some pretty impressive names.
Altogether.
And close to 200 points, too, I think, on the power play. But to me, the most important thing, and this is no disrespect to Jim Montgomery, Steve Ott, anybody that's touched the Blues power play in the past 3, 4, 5, 6 years, but I think to have an outside perspective, come in, look at the personnel, see what you got, just a different set of eyes, and to see how Prospal can come in and help the power play.
That's the part for me. Like I think I'm most fascinated to see just beyond the power play, because that's what everybody's going to look at. I'm really curious just what the offense looks like, right? Like there's a style Jim Montgomery wants to play, right? It's fast through the neutral zone, it's north, and it's going to the front of the net, but it's been the same guy that's been talking with the offense for the last 10 years. And so now you've got a different voice, just a different mindset, a different view on the game and on the ice. And with somebody who has experience in the American Hockey League, who worked under Jim Montgomery with Boston, I'll be curious to see kind of how he formulates the offense and wants to see it operate differently than what it's been in the past.
Yeah, and I think one thing too, Donnie, Alex, is that you heard Jim Montgomery a couple days ago say that Prospal is a guy who in his NHL career, he worked for everything he got. Like he wasn't fleet of foot, not a great skater. Things didn't come easy to him. He had to work for it. So this isn't a guy, NHL 1,100 games, 10 all-star, stuff like that, where he just walks in and he's like, hey, do this, because he's so talented. He was able to do it like that in his career. This is a situation where he's going to tell them how to put in the hard work, what to do, how you need to grind, how you need to prepare yourself the way that he did in his NHL career. And I think that'll be good for, a lot of this Blues team where yes, they do have some skill, but they're not superstars. They're guys who need to learn to do things the right way.
What team do you remember Vinny Prospal from?
The Lightning.
That's what that's the main one I think of is the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, but he had been around the block quite a
Philly,
bit.
Columbus, I forget which other, the Rangers I think he played with for a little bit.
I don't mean to overly simplify here, but I have a tendency to do that because I'm a simple-minded person. But one of the things in watching the playoffs, especially in watching Carolina and Vegas in the final, and we did not mention, we'll do that, but talk about Carolina winning the Cup, but there was all on the power play, there is always somebody in front of the goddamn goalie every single goddamn time.
It's weird how that works.
And until the Blues do that on a consistent basis, whomever those players are to do it, we could be talking about whomever is it seems as though the teams that win pay the price in front of the net, and the Blues do not do that on a regular enough basis.
Yeah, but the other problem with that is you can pay the price in front of the net, but it doesn't matter if the puck doesn't get on net. And for the longest time, that power play, they have guys in front of it. How many times does the puck actually hit the net for that guy in front to go to work?
That's a good point.
So that's the thing for me. I mean, the Blues power play has just been so one-dimensional in the past, to where it's pass to the left side, pass up top, pass to the right side. Then they try to go down in the middle and it doesn't work and it gets pushed out. Watching Carolina do it and watching Vegas do it, how Mark Stone and Jordan Stahl thrived in the postseason? By the puck hitting the goalie and the player getting the rebound.
Yep.
And so the Blues, the bigger thing is going to be, you got to get more than one shot on goal on a power play if you want to have that net front presence work. You've got the guys, you've got Jake Neighbors, you're going to have Justin Carbonneau when he gets to that point, Pavel Buchnevich, you've got the pieces. It's just a matter of, are you going to hit the net? And that's what I think Vinny Prospal hopefully can work with him on, of getting pucks on net.
Yeah, and I do think they got a couple guys, like a Neighbors. Buchnevich needs to do a better job of it. They've also moved those guys around a lot. One game, Buchnevich is in the bumper. The next game, Neighbors might be moving around. So, when they put those guys in front of the net, they've definitely got to do a better job. I think personally that the Blues could use more guys like that. And that's one thing I'm going to touch on in my article, the perfect offseason for the Blues. I think it'll be out tomorrow at The Athletic, is they just need some more toughness up front. And obviously we're talking 5-on-5 there, but it also applies to the power play because, have one of those guys up front be a net front presence. Jake Neighbors can't do it all the time. He can't be that guy all the time. But so Prospal comes in, he's going to give him a different look perhaps on the power play. But like you guys are saying, you definitely need that presence for this power play to be successful.
I really thought I had a good point there.
Almost.
And boy, I feel like I get to the doorstep, but I just fall just a little short.
You had a good one because watching Jordan Stahl won that Conn Smythe Trophy, which I know people probably disagree with, but he won that Conn Smythe Trophy solely from how nobody could move him away from the front of the net. And you need an immovable force every once in a while on your roster that can do those things.
Dude, like we talked about in our text messages, that is a man's man.
Yep.
That is when there is yard work to be done, he does not need a saw. He does not need tools.
Yeah.
He just uses his bare damn hand to rip the tree out of the freaking ground.
Donnie didn't like my imagery, JR, but I'll say it here for everybody. He milks the cow and sprays the milk right into his mouth.
Yeah.
That's what he does. That's what he does. That's what he does.
All right, so I obviously want to talk about Greg Cronin here. Now, when this announcement was made yesterday, and I listened to Monty's press availability, I thought to myself, this feels like a good hire for this young team. And I'm not saying that it's not, but it was a little bit alarming to see, or at least read a bit about some of the older Anaheim or some of the Ducks players that played for Cronin that apparently did not take to his teaching style, his coaching style very much at all. And so that got me obviously a little bit concerned. But I feel like this team is a team that needs some friggin' tough love. We talk about, I remember not very long ago when we talked about how after the Blues got thrashed in the second or third week of the season and Montgomery friggin' turned up the heat on them and how they, didn't take to that very well. And we were all kind of like, wait, you didn't take well to your coach being critical of your game and your effort? What the hell is wrong with you? So I feel like I'm kind of speaking out of both sides of my mouth here, guys, but it does concern me a little bit when you hear those things about Cronin, but also too, I feel as though the Blues do need some of that kind of stuff right now.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Cronin for sure, but let me set it up by saying this. The Blues were looking for a defensive coach, and where did they go? They went to the American Hockey League, and they brought in Mike Weber, a young guy, seems like a calm demeanor.
Former defenseman
who relates to today's young players because he just got out of coaching with the American Hockey League. And where did it get them?
Yeah.
Where did it get them?
Nowhere.
It didn't. And look, this is a young, good mind, with some coaching experience who, he's got Steve Ott, his friend on this, like he came in, he knew the personnel, and it just didn't get them anywhere. And so now you got a situation where, everybody's kind of questioning bringing in a Greg Cronin. Guys, Jim Montgomery, he was for this, obviously, because he's the one who brings him in.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons he decided that he wanted him here is because he's a hard ass.
Yeah.
And so he wants this team has to be tough, not only in front of the offensive net, but especially in front of the defensive net. And the defense was the worst, in like top 3 worst of all time in Blues history last year. Like, that's what this group needs. And I'm not selling Greg Cronin. I'm not saying for sure he's the guy who's going to come in and do that. All I'm saying is, give me a stickler for the details.
Yeah.
Give me a guy who's going to be a hard ass. Give me a guy who the guys are going to go home and bitch about. That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. But let me ask this, just devil's advocate here. I do not disagree with you, JR, at all. But again, we're talking about the NHL player in 2026, which is vastly different than the NHL player of even probably 10 to 15 years ago. So does that part concern you at all?
Yeah, a little bit, but I don't know. Maybe I'm old school a little bit. I'm like, get over it. Like,
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I'm not saying you disagree, but I'm just saying, like, what we dissected with that Blues team that evidently, took Jim Montgomery the wrong way after that early loss last season and kind of turtled a little bit after that. Okay, we need to get over that.
Yeah.
And guess what? we're not going to get over it by giving you a bigger hug. We're going to get over it by bringing, hey, guess who's coming here? Here's Greg Cronin. You know?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing for me. Like, I think we all can agree, Rod Brindamore's a hard ass.
Yeah.
Rod Brindamore's a guy that holds players accountable. I think I saw the story that he made guys hold a brick above their head after every practice during the season. And that was the weight of the Stanley Cup. Like, Rod Brindamore's a guy that if you don't play this style, you're not going to work for Carolina, i.e. Mikko Rantanen with what the Hurricanes were. I don't think that's a bad thing to get a guy to maybe weed out some of those that don't play the style that Jim Montgomery wants to play. Now, here's the thing. I will be 100% honest. I was skeptical of this yesterday in BK and Ferrario. I thought what you thought, Donnie, that it's like, look, I heard the Spit and Chicklets guys. Yeah. I heard how much they talked about how players just did not like playing for this guy. And I'm like, this is the answer to what your problems have been in years past. But then we had the chance to talk to Joey, and Joey played under Greg Cronin at Northeastern. And man, Joey I thought Joey laid it out perfectly in the sense of like, first of all, do you really think Alexander Steen's first big decision as general manager is not thinking things through with Greg Cronin? And like, that makes a lot of sense. How much have we heard about Steen that while he's a thinker, he takes his time?
Yeah. Doug Armstrong even said that when he was here.
Yeah. So like, you don't think he's thinking through all of the ins and outs for a guy that played on teams that was under hard asses like Ken Hitchcock. And then Jim Montgomery's also making this decision. And you have to imagine he knows this group being here for 2 years, how he's thinking this through. But Joey's point to me was, look, this is a guy that isn't just a guy that's going to yell like a John Tortorella or Mike Keenan. This is a guy that holds players accountable to where if you're not doing what needs to be done, he's going to stay on top of you until you get that fixed. And I think accountability was our biggest problem with the Blues this past season, right? Like, guys are not playing consistent. But Joey Pert said that, think of a trucker with those signs on the back of their truck that says 1-800-CALL ME, how was my driving? Joey said, how many times do you call the back of a truck number when they're driving well? He said, never. You only call when they're terrible.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all of the voices you're hearing about Greg Cronin are the negative ones because it didn't work in Anaheim. Anaheim was a bad team. You know what you want to do when you're a bad team? You get some accountability in there.
Yeah.
And the players, if you look at their numbers defensively, they were better under Greg Cronin, but they didn't like playing for him. And yeah, that is this new age, but I think there's some accountability that needs to take place for the Blues. And I think all of the negatives come out, but the positives of what Greg Cronin, who's been around college and the NHL and the minor leagues for a long time, maybe there is something there. And I will just instill the trust of Jim Montgomery and Alex Steen, even if I'm skeptical of the hiring.
Yeah. And also in Anaheim, you know, it's not where he just hit the skids. They had to get rid of him. And then they hired Joe Schmo. They got rid of him and brought in Joel Quenneville.
They got 21 points better from the first season Cronin was there to the second season Cronin was there.
On the upswing, the team was, even if they didn't like playing for him, and if Joel Quenneville's not available, Greg Cronin might still be there. I'm not saying for sure he would have. So after he leaves Anaheim, he goes to the American Hockey League, and he coached the Minnesota Wild's American Hockey League affiliate, Iowa, the Iowa Wild, last season. And I just read Mike Russo's story this morning. He interviewed the Iowa GM, Hendricks is his name, and he was praising Greg Cronin for what he did with the young players with the Iowa Wild. And the one thing, I know it's cliche, but the one thing he said, he set goals for each and every one of them, and he stayed on top of them. And, you know, hey, you need to reach this level. You're capable of this. And he said, you know, what he did for those young players for the Minnesota Wild was just phenomenal. And they didn't make the playoffs, and, you know, they struggled with their goaltending, so on and so forth. But he said his one-on-one work with some of the young players was great. And that's exactly what the Blues need.
I think for the Cronin hire, I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths, but I'm just assuming. I think people saw the Cronin hire and thought immediately Jordan Kyrou and Pavel Buchnevich. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's what the hiring was for. The hiring was for Snuggerud and Holloway and Dvorsky and Stenberg and Carbonneau on top of Logan Mailloux, Adam Jiricek, Theo Lindstein, Philip Broberg. Like, this wasn't a hire to get the best out of the guys that are already there. I think those guys the career's in their own hands, right? That's what Doug told us at the press conference. Like, if I'm Jordan Kyrou, I wake up tomorrow thinking, how do I get better?
Yeah.
I think the Cronin hire was for, hey, we've got these younger guys. We want a certain mindset to be instilled in them. This is the style we're going to play, and Greg Cronin can do that with these guys.
Yeah, how big of a deal is it for Monty to be able to put together his own staff? It's got to be friggin' huge. I mean, even if he liked the guys that were here, when he got here, you still want to have your own guys, your own people. So it's got, and if I'm not mistaken, is this the first time in his career that he's been able to put together a staff?
Yeah, because Dallas, he took over midseason, kept him, and then he left early because of his assistance program that he went to. And then Boston took the same team for their 2 years and then was gone that second year.
Yeah.
Me personally, I don't know about your thoughts on this, JR. I thought last year Jim Montgomery had to do a lot more than what typical head coaches have to do, right? Like when Steve Ott went down to the minor leagues, you had Claude Julien, you had Mike Weber, but it seemed like Jim Montgomery, at least hearing him talk, had his hands in every single pot with the team. Yeah. And as a head coach, I think what they want is they want their assistant coaches to do the jobs that they're assigned, and then the head coach can kind of manage everything from on top, right? Like the CEO of sorts. So that's where I think this is going to benefit Jim. He doesn't have to worry about the X's and O's on the defensive side. He doesn't have to worry about the X's and O's on the power play. That's these guys. Now I can oversee it all.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious that when you get to hire your new staff, you're going to create this bond with them that maybe you might not have had with the guys that you inherited. Don't get me wrong, Claude Julien, 20 plus years, coaches Boston, coaches Montreal, all the respect everybody, has for him. But now Jim Montgomery was in from the ground floor on trying to bring Cronin in and bring Prospal in. I think they said they interviewed 5 guys for the job that Prospal eventually got. I didn't hear how many guys, with Cronin, but
sounded like Cronin was their main target.
Kind of their target there. But what I liked, Donnie, what Jim Montgomery said, because I asked him that question, what was it like to be able to be involved in creating your first staff? He said it creates more ownership. And what he means by that, which, you can catch on to that, is because he's the guy responsible for hiring them and bringing them in, he's kind of got this connection where they have to succeed or else it looks like maybe he made the wrong choice. So, anytime you're going to create ownership, you're going to create that bond with this coaching staff, it just allows it to get closer. And I like Alex's point here is that, Greg Cronin should be able to handle the job without needing a ton of input from Jim Montgomery.
Yeah.
Prospal's getting his feet wet. Maybe he needs a little bit more help with Jim Montgomery, who's worked with forwards a lot in the past. But these are guys who should be able to handle the job. And, maybe Montgomery doesn't get as pulled as much as he has in the past.
Boy, it's just very fascinating to me with this as well, because there is a certain amount of chemistry, which you talk about in a regular team, and just the 22, 24 man roster, you need that sort of chemistry to want to fight for each other. And so I would assume you sort of need that in the coaching staff too. Yeah. And when you got Monty hiring your own guys, it's not only that, but it's also the buck stops here. There's no excuses. I put this together, so if it doesn't work,
and let's also remember, this is the first time Jim Montgomery has missed the playoffs. So there's going to be a little bit extra appetite and hunger to get things fixed. And that's why I go back to, I may have been skeptical of the Cronin hire at the time, but the more you think about it, and I'm glad Joey laid it out for me, it's like Jim Montgomery's not going to think through every bad possible scenario with a hire. And that's why they chose this, which I'm going to instill the faith in the guy that has had a lot of success in his NHL career.
Absolutely, no doubt. Let's take a break. We're going to come back. JR's got a roll. Alex and I have a couple more segments for you here on the Last Minute Blues podcast. Hang around. We are back for segment number 2 of the Last Minute Blues podcast, Donnie and Alex. So we kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand when we were discussing the Blues, but the Carolina Hurricanes win the Stanley Cup.
Yes!
You were 100% correct. I was 100% right. I didn't want to be right because I didn't want Vegas to win, but I just wanted to be right about something hockey related.
I know.
But dude, you were absolutely correct, man. The Canes, the Canes' depth just wore wore Vegas down. Dude, in that last game, Vegas just looked beat.
18 minutes without a shot, Donnie.
They were just, you could just tell they were friggin' gassed. You could tell by the looks on their faces that they were gassed. And it was so fantastic to watch that Stanley Cup presentation, to see Rod the Bod manhandle that Stanley Cup, to see Jordan Stahl get it. It was just a really, I just find the Hurricanes a pretty easy team to root for.
Yeah, they are. And I think they're an easier team to root for in that series because they were going up against the evil empire Vegas, right? That's the part I think a lot of people don't like how Vegas operates. I know the backstory with Carter Hart people weren't fond of. John Tortorella taking over midseason. Like, every narrative was, nobody likes Vegas. We want to see Carolina win. But just the more, before that series even began, before the playoffs began, I looked at the Eastern Conference, and with no Florida in there, you see how vulnerable everybody else is. Like, I'm not taking anything away from Carolina, but if Florida was in that postseason, I think Florida would have given Carolina a run for their money to possibly beat them, because Florida plays the same style that Carolina does. And in my opinion, they play it better because they just got better players. Like, there's no superstar on Carolina's team. But what Carolina did so well was, one, utilized their depth. They have 4 lines that will go up against you and 3 legitimate lines that can score. Like, Jordan Stahl was their 3rd line center. Their defensemen, all of their defensemen, Donnie, were within about a minute of each other in terms of average time on ice. That means they can put any of their 6 defensemen out there in any scenario and feel comfortable with it. They all play the same style. And then the third thing for me was just the health. Like, this is why the Cup is so hard to win, because you have to stay healthy from start to finish. Yeah. And it helps when you only lose 3 games in the playoffs. And only one of those was prior to the Stanley Cup final. Yeah. Like, look at Vegas. McNabb had his nose jacked up from that puck.
That was crazy.
Which, credit to that dude. Like,
he was back the next game.
That's why I love hockey. Like, those guys just come back. But William Karlsson went down in what was it, game 5?
Yep, and that was the death.
That was massive for them. So, like, they injuries took a toll on that team. And Carolina, man, like, I don't know if they can do it again next year, because the Eastern Conference is just going to keep getting better, but they deserved that for how they play. They play a very responsible game. They play a deep game without any superstars, and none of their guys take a shift off. And honestly, it's an identity that the Blues hope to resemble.
Yeah, so I want to ask just a couple of sort of random questions about those teams and about that series. One, the first being, are you surprised that Tortorella was not brought back to coach Vegas again moving forward?
A little, because I thought, for the success that they had. When they hired him, I didn't think he was going to be back. I thought you hire him to try and make it as deep as possible. Like, Tortorella's not a guy you go through an entire season with. He's like the fixer. But because the Bruce Cassidy narrative went out, it's like, man, you went to the Stanley Cup final. You'd think you'd want one more year of that, because he got the best of Mitch Marner. You got the best of some of your depth players. Like, that was a good looking team. You'd think Tortorella you'd want to keep around. They had different plans with the AHL head coach, it sounds like they're going to hire.
Yeah.
To me, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you had an experienced head coach in Bruce Cassidy. You fired him to get more experience in the playoffs, and then you don't bring him back to go get an inexperienced NHL head coach. So I'm not going to question Vegas. They seem to know what they're doing, but. And I guess the other question you have to ask is, did Tortorella want to come back? I don't know why he wouldn't.
No, I'm pretty sure that he at that presser at the end of the or at the end of the finals, I think that he was pretty apparent that he wanted to be back in Vegas.
So that's the part that for me doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're going from experience to more experience to inexperience. And guess what? If Vegas struggles next year, you know what you're looking for? A Bruce Cassidy or a John Tortorella. Maybe he's still available. Maybe they hire him in December of next year.
Okay, so then still at this point, as we sit here on the 17th of June, Vegas has not given Bruce Cassidy approval to speak to anyone, not just Edmonton, anybody.
Correct. Because
what a douche move.
I know. Well, because like Bruce Cassidy voiced his like, look, I'll interview for any job, because like Toronto was the one that there was speculation of, well, maybe they'd interview him. But yeah, I mean, Vegas said they'd address that once the Stanley Cup final is done. And like, they had their exit press availability yesterday. So it's like, you can't You're just not doing it not to be doing it.
Okay, so then let me ask this. So then the situation in Edmonton is still at sort of a pause because the NHL is doing this investigation on Mike Babcock.
Yeah.
And again, from what I understand, if I'm wrong, please correct me, that this investigation is not about him showing the pictures from players' phones in their one-on-one interview. This is something separate from that the NHL did not investigate at that time because he had gotten fired in Columbus already. That's
the way that I'm understanding it. Now, there's probably more ins and outs of it that I don't know.
Yes.
I would imagine they're investigating just the Mike Babcock run. Like, all of the stories that have come out from his time with Detroit, all of the stories that have come out from his time in Toronto, right, of making Mitch Marner list the top 5 hardest and least hardest working players on the team. Oof. I think this is more of an investigation of, hey, there's a lot of stories coming out about Mike Babcock. We don't want the Blue Jackets situation to happen again.
Right. Even
if the NHL doesn't really deem that the problem, I think this is more, do we really want to let this guy back into the NHL? Which, call me crazy, I think this is just a weird way to you're going to investigate it, but you're probably going to let him back in. Like, I don't think you're going to say no to this, not after you brought Joel Quenneville back. And I know very different situations, but like, you invest. I don't know what precedent you're setting if you're the NHL, if you do the investigation on Quenneville and say he can come back.
That's a great point.
And then Mike Babcock's investigation, which also isn't very good, but you don't let him back. But remember, like, that style of coaching, Bill Peters, who was abusing players, like kicking them on the bench, he has not been allowed back into the NHL. Right. So they've got a precedent that I'm very interested to see where this goes with Mike Babcock.
And also, too, if this Mike Babcock thing does not work out in Edmonton, which I think... I don't want to completely write it off, because when you have Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, I mean,
right,
you got to give the opportunity for it to work. But if Edmonton, if this does not work, this is one of the worst runs of a general manager in front office that I can almost ever remember happening in almost any sport, from the offer sheets to the goaltending. I mean, it just seems like Edmonton, with literally the best player in the world, they are a disaster. Yep. And putting Mike Babcock there does not necessarily make me, I mean, maybe they'll be better, but I don't know that that's going to be the thing that pushes them over to the top.
No, Mike Babcock doesn't make you have better goaltending.
No,
Mike Babcock doesn't improve your defensive play. Mike Babcock doesn't make the bad contracts on the team look any better. Like, no, this is a roster problem more than it's a coaching problem. Like, right. We've seen around the NHL, like, there's coaches you could bring in to have success with less talented rosters. It's one, the roster construction that's put together, and Edmonton has just been a blunder. It even goes beyond the offer sheets, right? They've butchered drafts. They've let guys walk that should be there still.
They signed Darnell Nurse to that insane freaking contract. Now you're
trying to trade him.
Yeah.
Like, you signed, and I love the style of play Trent Frederick is, but like, you gave that massive contract to Trent Frederick. Jake Wallman, you paid a ton of money to, who's not a guy who you trust defensively. So they got issues that go beyond the coach. And this is just, to me, the coach decision is going to be a microcosm of what the general manager problem is. Like, I don't think Stan Bowman can do the job that he used to do in Chicago, and especially with Edmonton. The guy that I think they should hire is Tortorella.
I was literally going to say, if the Babcock situation goes south, then he's right there waiting for it.
Tortorella is as close to being a general manager as you can ask for on a team, like, without making the decisions. And it's a guy you trust. It's a guy that just showed his ability to win. And guess what? It's a guy that doesn't work very long. So you try to sell Connor McDavid on being here long term. This is the temporary fix until another better coach becomes available to you. Get a guy that can try and get you back to the Stanley Cup final, that can get the best out of your roster. And then once the dust settles and you show McDavid, like, hey, this is a good team, we can build with this, get rid of some of the bloated contracts, then you wait for the right coach to become available. Let's say Bednar gets fired from Colorado in 2 years. Edmonton goes and gets that guy, and then you're feeling comfortable where you're at. So that would be the direction I'd go, but they've seen to make dumb decisions in the past.
Speaking of dumb decisions, I shouldn't have.
No. This might be a great transition.
But the Toronto Maple Leafs today hired the coach, what I believe to be is the coach before the coach that Doug Armstrong fires. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
So Jim Hiller is going to take the job. He's going to get let go. They'll hire somebody else. Then after they hire another wrong person, that's when Armstrong comes in, cleans house, and does what he needs to do.
It's a double joke, too, because he did that in St. Louis, and he's also going to do that in Toronto when he's the new general manager.
So, but talk about this hiring of Jim Hiller as far as being the Toronto Maple Leafs coach. I was talking to JR before we went on the air. He said that coach has an existing relationship with Austin Matthews and William Nylander, which would obviously make this make more sense. But man, if you're a Maple Leaf fan, dude, are you excited about that?
I think
maybe you're excited because you're staring at a number 1 draft pick. You know your team probably can't be as bad as they were last year.
Here's the thing. Who else were you going to hire if you're Toronto to get excited about? Like, to me, Joe Pavelski doesn't get me excited.
Yeah.
Like, I know they were talking about it. Could he be the next Marty St. Louis? That's a really bold chance to take when you're trying to convince Austin Matthews not to leave Toronto. Like, I think when you get an analytical general manager, you want experience in areas that you're not familiar with. It's the same thing Eric Tulsky is with Rod Brindamore in Carolina, right? He's an analytics darling. You get the guy that understands the game of hockey to run the bench. Now, I'm not saying Jim Hiller is going to be this sensation. Jim Hiller is a guy that won 48 games as a coach with LA a couple of years ago. Jim Hiller is a guy who was an assistant coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs when Matthews and Nylander and Tavares were there. I think he's a guy that can win. Is he a guy that gets you to a Stanley Cup? I don't think so.
Right.
But I also don't think that roster's in that position to do that.
Right.
I think that roster, I think you laid it out perfectly. I think he is the coach that you bring in to get to your Barry Trotz, to get to your John Tortorella, if you want to call it that. He's the guy that fixes the retool until you're ready to start competing again. Like, I think you need to get this train back on track for Austin Matthews and Nylander. Then when it's on track, you operate under okay, is this the guy that does it? Here's another great example. He's the guy before Ken Hitchcock in St. Louis, right?
Andy Murray?
Yeah. He's the Andy Murray, where we want to start winning. We want a system in place, but I don't know if you're the guy for us. So I like this better than any of the other options. Like, I don't think Tortorella works there. I don't even think Tortorella would have taken that job. I like the idea of Cassidy, but they're not going to agree to it. And all of these other options, man, don't go AHL coach. Don't go no coaching experience. I think you need some NHL experience.
I also thought, and again, please tell me I'm wrong here, that the Peter Laviolette hire in Los Angeles was fine. But again, but again, that roster. So it's almost like hire who you want as the coach. You still only have one friggin' center. So if
I'm them, I'm going a younger coach on that team, right? That team, I think I'm looking at saying, okay, well, I got Quentin Byfield. I've got Kempe. I've got Brant Clark. Like, I got a younger group. Like, they kind of needed to do what Toronto's doing, maybe the in-between. And maybe that is Peter Laviolette. But Laviolette's a guy I look at that you hire to try and get you to the playoffs and win.
Yeah.
And I don't think LA is set up for that. Now, I say this with the understanding, like, the Pacific Division is weak. Like, I know everybody could be like, well, look at what Vegas did. That's fine. I don't think Vegas is that good. I think Vegas ran through some banged up teams. I think the Pacific Division is 2 teams strong. I think it's Edmonton and Vegas, and that's it. So, I mean, I guess I get it, but that's the problem at times with the NHL. It's just retreading coaches.
Yeah.
Like, I like the AHL opportunities for teams that are kind of in the tweens, and that's where LA's at right now.
I want to ask you about David Carl. What is going to make him jump ship from University of Denver to take an NHL coaching job? Will he ever? Will he be at Denver for 20 more years? But it just seems like every coaching cycle, he's almost he's literally the first one that we talk about, but it seems like it peters away pretty quickly and he ends up staying at Denver. Do you think that maybe he's sort of hanging around University of Denver to see what happens with Jared Bednauer, to see if Colorado turns it around or if they let him go?
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm David Carl, I mean, look at the two opportunities that have been most interested in him. It was Toronto and it was Chicago. You want any of those jobs? Yeah. If you're like the best college hockey coach out there right now, I'm not going to tarnish my legacy by going to a bad team to where people think I'm not a good coach. Because you don't get a whole lot of those opportunities, man. Like, you jump from college to the NHL. If you struggle, teams don't look at you anymore like, oh, man, that guy's really good. So I think if I'm him, Colorado makes sense. But let's also be blunt about Colorado. They've got McKinnon and Makar, who are incredible players. Their roster construction is getting tight soon. Like, they don't have a whole lot of money. And we just saw what happens if you lose a Cale Makar to that team in the playoffs. I'd be skeptical of how long Colorado's run is going to be, if that makes sense. I'm not saying they're bad. Like, you've got Makar and McKinnon, but I'm very skeptical of how long they're going to be they're going to be the team to beat in the Western Conference for how good some of these other teams are around. But yeah, if I'm David Carl, I'm waiting to find my opportunity to go to the NHL and sustain a winner where I got a young group that knows how to win, that's ready to win. And I don't know what that team is. Well,
and also, too, I think they're a year away from needing to re-up Makar. And what kind of money do you think he gets as the best defenseman in the league and one of the best players in the league? Easy.
Kirill Kaprizov is making, 17 mil? I think that's what he's making. Yeah. Macklin Celebrini's probably going to be around 15 mil. There's going to be a discount, I would imagine, towards the team.
Yeah.
If Cale Makar is not making north of $15 million, it's a steal.
Yeah, absolutely. So
everybody will turn and say, well, Nathan McKinnon's the MVP of that team. No. Cale Makar is the MVP of that team.
He keeps it locked down, man. And when he was not there or was not at 100%, you saw the massive difference in that team. So he's going to get a big bump.
Yep.
And then their money issues are even going to be compounded that much more. That's going to be a friggin' tough team to retool on the fly. Not retool on the fly. I don't mean it like that, because then you kind of compare that to the Blues. Different situations entirely. But to kind of adjust that roster, you don't have a lot of leeway there.
No, and you got some older guys too, like Landeskog's not getting any younger. Brock Nelson is a good player, but he's up there in age.
Boy, and disappeared in the playoffs.
And Nazem Kadri, you got on that contract that it keeps going, and like that guy's old too. So, I still think they're one of the best teams in the Western Conference next season, and probably will be for the next 2 or 3. But at some point, it starts to turn a little bit. And for what Minnesota's building, for what I think Dallas is still building, things get a little bit more Utah is going to be a dangerous team in the next couple of years. Things start to turn a little bit in the Western Conference than what it's always the Colorado Avalanche.
All right, so we've already seen, or the news have come out about a couple of players asking for trades. Dylan Larkin obviously being the big one. Darnell Nurse now. There's rumors that Connor Hellebuck.
Team USA is just doing that. They're just conspiring with each other, Donnie.
100%. And there's been a couple of trades in the last couple of days. For those that are frothing at the mouth for Jordan Kyrou to be moved. For one, I don't know that I could handle another Jordan Kyrou email. I love Blues fans.
You got a lot of those?
Oh my God. It's like a third of the emails in which that we get, and it's either pro or it's con, and they either love him and think it's insane the way that Blues fans look at him, or they think that he's the second coming of Satan. But when do you see potentially a Kyrou deal happening?
I think it happens prior to the draft, if it happens.
So and the draft is next Friday.
Yeah, well, I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Doug Armstrong had told JR or told people that like June 20th is when you think things start to pick up. And that makes sense because you're 3 days away from that, right? Yeah. You're the week of the draft, like next Thursday is the draft. So next Friday is the draft. Yeah. I think next week is probably when you start to see some trades go down because everybody wants to get their stuff in order prior to the draft. So in my opinion, if Jordan Kyrou gets traded, it's prior to the draft. And once the draft is done, then I would take my percentage to like a 25% chance that it happens. Because at that point, everybody goes to free agency and you want to see what you can get at free agency. And then I think there's a little window that opens again after free agency of, okay, well, we didn't get the guy we thought we were going to get. Now who can we turn to? But the problem is at that point, you have to trade prospects because the Blues don't want first-round picks. Like your chance to trade a first-round pick for Jordan Kyrou is at this draft. Right? Like you're talking one of these top 10 picks. So I think it happens prior to Friday night. And if it doesn't, then I think there's a really strong chance that he is back wearing number 25 for the Blues next year.
Dude, that is going to drive some people up a friggin' wall.
And then we got to deal with all of the rumors from training camp on of, is he upset? Does he get traded at the deadline? Yeah.
I don't know that I do not know that I have the intestinal fortitude to make it through that. If he's
back, I am going to be praying that he goes on a tear and scores a ton of goals because then we can put the trade stuff to rest because you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I'm hypocritical saying that because I said last year that when the no trade clause kicked in, Donnie, I said, we're done talking about it.
Dude, I have been up and down on this guy over the course of the last years.
That roller coaster just needs to go off the track so we can stop. Okay?
Dude, absolutely.
Or get stuck like the people at Six Flags.
Let's do this here. How incredibly awful would that be?
That's why I don't ride those anymore.
Dude, all right, so let's do this. I actually, maybe we'll get to an email or two, but I actually thought of something that I want to ask you after this final break. Final break, Last Minute Blues podcast coming back for our last segment. So we are back for segment number 3. And Alex, I was going to ask, and I might still read an email or two, but in talking a little bit about free agency, I would just assume that free agency is going to be much ado about nothing for not even much ado. I mean, I don't think the Blues are going to be active at all.
No, I think if the Blues do anything, it's a depth signing.
And that's what I wanted to ask you specifically, not to cut you off, but like, what do you think free agency looks like for this team right now with where they stand?
Two-way deals for guys that can play on the NHL but are probably at the American Hockey League. Maybe a veteran defenseman that can come in and compete for one of those roster spots. I don't think you're seeing anything of a guy that's on the NHL roster unless there's significant trades that happen between now and the draft. Like, let's say Parayko gets traded. Well, then you're talking about going to the market and signing a veteran defenseman.
Yep.
If Jordan Kyrou gets traded and you're getting a prospect in return, well, now you're talking about maybe looking at a depth guy that could provide offense. I just don't see them going into those waters.
It doesn't make sense.
No, I think you're talking about...
And as a fan, you got to know that it doesn't make sense.
Totally. And you can't be upset about it. When you see all these other teams making free agent signings, it's like, that's not where their water is right now.
It's not our year to be doing that.
Yes.
We will get that Paul Stastny year. We're just not there yet.
Trade waters are where you want to be right now. And like, I think you'll get a couple of depth signings. I think you'll probably see a couple of names invited to training camp to compete because you always want internal competition for your playing spots. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you see anything above a $2 million contract for the Blues because there's no spots for them to play.
Do you see, and I keep asking you this question, and I swear to God, I keep asking it, expecting a different answer, and I know you're probably going to give me the same answer that you and JR have been giving me for the last couple of months, but do you see an Edmonton, a Vegas now, a team that is desperate for goaltending, try to get Benner away from the Blues?
Vegas, no, because they've got Carter Hart now, and I think they'll believe Carter Hart's good.
Okay.
I think the only team that I would consider interested in him would be Florida.
Okay.
If they don't bring back Bobrovsky. But even then, like Jacob Markstrom's name's out there right now. Buffalo's got like 4 goaltenders that I think they're probably going to move.
They got to figure that whole thing out.
Montreal knows that Dobush is going to be their guy now. So now they've got Fowler and Montembeault, and you don't carry those 3 guys. So I think there's going to be a lot of other goalies that get moved. And I believe unless a team is going to pay a hefty price, I don't think Binnington gets moved.
Okay.
I think Binnington is starting for the Blues next year. And if they're bad, Binnington may be a deadline move. But if not, there's a chance Binnington's here for the rest of the season and you either see him walk or maybe they talk to him about being as a 1B. Because here's the thing, like I think people are like, well, he wants to be a starter. He's never going to not have the opportunity to be a starter here. Even if Hofer is incredible, the Blues are very cautious with how they use their goaltenders.
Yeah.
They're not going to overwork a goalie. No goalie is going to get 60 games on this team. So that's why I'm not just sitting here acting as if, well, Binnington's gone at the end of this season because he's a free agent. Man, if he likes St. Louis and if they're going to look at him and say, hey, you're always going to have a chance to start 30 to 40 games for us, you're comfortable where you're at. You know the team. You feel like it's on the upswing. You're going to be a legend. Your jersey is going to get retired, I would imagine. Maybe even a statue, depending on what the rest of your career looks like. I think there's a better chance that he's here for the rest of his career than there is he's on another team to start next season.
We talked about this a little bit last week, and I'm sorry to ask for the refresher, but I'm getting old and I forget things sometimes.
You too, man.
But who is the Blues' third string goaltender?
Well, I think now it's Georgi Romanov.
Okay. And because he just signed that two-way.
Yeah. Now, I'm saying that with the understanding of, let's say Hofer gets injured this year, he's brought up, but then if Binnington gets hurt, there's no comfort of this guy, in my opinion,
being the backup,
being the guy that can start for you. Like, if two guys go down, you're probably looking for outside help, and Romanov is a guy that continues to develop. But yeah, I think on the depth chart now is 3rd Romanov, 4 Will Cranley, and then 5 is these Louvre Herenstam and Marcus Gildoff that they got from the Islanders. But those two guys are going to be playing over in Europe next year. So I think you've got Romanov, who looked awesome in the playoffs, and now you hope that with Ott there, things can settle down and the play looks better in front of him. But yeah, I think he's your number 3 right now.
Wow. Boy, that doesn't, I mean, and no disrespect to him, but that's not super reassuring by any stretch of the imagination.
It's not, especially when you think of what you went into last year with, to where your number 3 was Colton Ellis, and people were like, well, this guy's probably ready to be your number 2. But I'll also say if Romanov has a year like he did in the playoffs, by January, we're going to be saying, well, Romanov's ready to be your backup, so let Binnington walk.
Absolutely.
And you know, like, that makes sense. That's how this works. They get older, they perform, and they get more experience. And that's the thing with David Alexander. I'm just not going to question the goaltending decisions. Yeah. Right? Like, at what point has David Alexander ever made you question about the goalie? That's very true. He is the best goalie coach, in my opinion, in the National Hockey League. So he was the one that decided on Romanov when they needed to go find a number 3 for their, or 4 for their depth. He has turned Joel Hofer and Binnington to what they are. Yeah. So I'll let David Alexander figure that out.
All right. So I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks. We got our big draft show next Friday. All right. We're going to be live from Enterprise Center. How in the hell do I prepare for this? What do I even do to get myself locked in and prepared? Because if it's me looking at draft prospects, that's probably not a really great time for anybody.
Hey, I tell you what, buddy, I got that taken care of for you.
Good, you're the hockey guy.
I got that taken care of because I've done way too much looking at these names to go past it. I don't think there's any prepare that has to come with this. I think it's the fandom. That's why we're doing this. Like, there's a real excitement. I was on a call with the Blues last week that they gauged the interest of season ticket holders to have another event at Enterprise for the draft. And I think they said they had like 1,500 responses like within 48 hours. So there is a massive appetite and excitement right now for the Blues in this draft specifically. That's the prepared I think we go into this one with. One, it's how big of a draft this is for the Blues. One being it's Steen's kind of first one, Doug's last one, 3 picks, depending on drafts or trades that take place prior to that draft, trades that can happen in that draft. Yeah. And then you look at the profile of the players where they're picking and the landscape of what happens after Friday and Saturday of now what does the team look like moving forward. So I think that lays out what the show is, plus moves around the NHL, what other teams are doing, who other teams are drafting, who other teams are hiring. And then on top of that, we're going to have some really fun guests. Curbs is going to stop by throughout the night. JR is going to stop by throughout the night because he's got his athletic duties. So it is a Last Minute Blues podcast live show, but JR will join us throughout the evening. We're going to have Doug Armstrong join us once the draft is settled. Probably going to have Tom Stillman and Chris Zimmerman. And then I've got a draft prospect expert who's going to join us via Zoom at some point once the picks are made so we can get his take on the player that they're drafting. And then I'm also hoping we can have potentially my good buddy Jeff Merrick join us to talk about the draft in the offseason. So this is going to be a big one for people because we're going to have great guests. We're going to be live on YouTube so people can watch on top of us being live on 101 ESPN. And you're going to have Donnie and Alex all night long.
Dude, you have done so much work for this already. I haven't done anything.
You don't need to do anything.
All right.
You're the entertainment here, man.
Oh, God.
You're entertaining. I'm just the nerd that thinks I know everything about hockey, and I don't.
Do you know why this is so perfect that this draft party is next Friday night?
Why?
Because on Saturday, we are having a graduation party for my daughter. Okay. So Friday night, my house is going to be absolutely insane, and I don't have to be there, and I'm so excited.
You should probably let Mary know that the draft is going to go till about 3 a.m. We're going to find ourselves with
It won't matter because she'll be dragging my ass out of bed at 7 a.m. to clean windowsills
Let
or
her know
something.
that we're going to be finding some buffalo wings afterwards and probably some beers, and we'll figure it out after that.
Boy, I got to tell you, and I know that like I do this podcast, and so people, I think, they view me sometimes weirdly as like a part of the propaganda structure for the Blues or whatever. I am just genuinely excited about where this team is and where this team is going. And I know that there is a million things before we get to a Stanley Cup run again. But to me, all of these things, when you were sitting over here and we're talking about the development in Springfield or talking about what Cronin, these players, you're listing off all of these great young players. Yeah. And we got 3 first-rounders here. I'm just so excited as to where we're going to go, man. Yeah. I feel like things are really looking good for a Blues fan right now.
I hope so, because we're seeing now, and not to bring the Cardinals into a Blues podcast, but you're seeing how much the city buys into a team after 2 months of playing good sport.
Yeah.
Imagine what it would be like if you can get the Blues on that upswing again. And, you're probably still 2 to 3 years away from being in that cup window if things go the direction that you're going. But that's why I think this draft show to me is so exciting, because there's a lot of potential of what can happen, of trades, picks, players that you're going to be bringing in. And that's going to lead you to the uncertainty of the season. And man, if this Blues team can get off to a good start in October and November, people are going to be pumped.
Yeah.
If they start slow, I think people are going to be right back to where they were last year. But man, if they can start off well in October and November, people are going to be through the roof for this team. So that's why I think what this is right now is it's just pure excitement. So I'm pumped for it. I'll tell you this real quick, because I know how much we love Jeff on this show. I listened to the Riz podcast the other day. They did a best of, and it was all Burton. Yeah. And I was just listening to it. First, the one they played was him interviewing Wayne Gretzky, and it was fun to listen to. But the more you listened to his voice, the more I was like, God, I miss that guy. Yeah. And then I went back and listened to the show that we did where he did the trade deadline pre and post with us. And that's the part that's fun, because you think of like what Jeff would be getting pumped about with this one. So I'm excited to do this draft show with you, man. It's going to be so much fun. And yeah, that's why the Blues are going in a direction you hope that they continue to build off of this and keep people on board.
Absolutely so. All right. So we're going to podcast next week.
Yeah, I think we're going to do Tuesday. Yeah.
And then we'll be back again for the draft show on Friday. So you're going to get a lot of us next week.
By the way, I said this without asking our video team, so I'm not even going to look to my left and see if they're giving me the nasty eye.
Right.
We'll find out.
I'm going to let you handle that.
Okay.
All right. Sounds good. It's the Last Minute Blues podcast for our friend Jeremy Rutherford, who's currently at the chiropractor.
Getting his back worked.
Getting himself worked out. Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. I'm Donny Fandango. Thank you, as always, for listening and for watching. The podcast is growing, and that's all because of you, and we genuinely thank you very much. It's a Last Minute Blues podcast. Thanks as always, and let's go Blues.
Thanks for tuning into the Last Minute Blues podcast on your home for Blues hockey, 101 ESPN.